when you come out of meditation, it is very important to do it with gentleness, consideration, while being kind to yourself. Because when you meditate, basically we're doing precision work. It's like brain surgery or eye surgery with fine precision, laser-like, sharp tools. You don't want to jerk the mind. It's like something, a gross image would be something like lifting heavy weight. Whether at the gym or you're carrying something heavy, while you're about to carry, you have to make sure your back is okay, you're lifting with your knees. You don't make sudden jerky moves. You don't immediately get up. Take a moment. Notice every time your eyes come together and open. When your eyelashes touch and open. When you're about to move your fingers, coming out of the posture. It's precious. It's almost like you never will get that chance again. This is when life truly becomes precious. In this crazy time period for human beings on this planet, where everything is rush, 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 where we are filled up with panic, fear, frustrations, restlessness, we don't have time for slow. We don't have time for, okay, take it easy. It's okay. Even going to answer nature's call to the bathroom, we want to do it very quickly. Okay, come on, chop chop, let's go. You're in traffic, you're in the bus stop, you're waiting for the bus. Come on, where are you? One time I was in New York, years ago. I used to be a designer years ago, and it was lunchtime, and it was my lunch break, and I was standing, it was one of these skyscraper, high-rise buildings, glass. We were, I think, on the 11th or 15th floor, something like that, in the Avenue of the Stars. It's a very fancy area of Manhattan. And the CEO stood next to me. And I was looking at him, he was looking at me, and he was like, "What are you looking at?" We knew each other very well, because we used to fly a lot to businesses, because it was jewelry and diamond industry. And I was a designer of jewelry at the time. And I said, "Look down. Look down. You see all these people rushing back and forth? They were like ants." In New York, if you've ever been to New York, the sidewalks are wide. They're not narrow sidewalks. And they're full of people with bags rushing. And I said, "Where are these people going?" And he said, he shook his head and he said, "You always ask the weirdest questions." And I said, "Yeah, but that doesn't answer the question. Where are these people going?" He says, "I don't know." But that is exactly what we do. We are rushing and rushing, and I am tempted to say, I guarantee you that if you go and ask any of those people on the streets in crazy traffic, New York, ask them, "Hey, could you, one millisecond, 1 second, where are you going? Why are you rushing?" Probably they're going to say, "I don't know, I just have to." Because everyone else is doing it. Because we copy each other all the time. The problem is we take that with us everywhere we go. Even if you are alone on an island, vacation, somewhere, You still are carrying that rush, rush, rush wherever you go. So whenever you're meditating, please bear that in mind. Let me come back and inhabit my body, this body. Let me know how the feet feel, the legs, the back feels, instead of trying to get it to be a productive time. Okay, what am I going to get out of this sitting? Am I going to a jhana? Okay, which jhana? I've been to the first, second, okay, this one better be the third jhana. I've been on retreats where people were like, okay, in this retreat, I think I want to become a sotapanna. And what if you, one time I was curious, like, what if you can't? He's like, no, I have to. That ruins the whole retreat. You're no longer in the state of acceptance. Meditation is supposed to be inspiring. This path, Lord Buddha's path, is inspiring. That's why it has survived for 2,000, almost 600 years. It has survived thanks to people carrying the Dhamma in their hearts. It has not survived simply because people repeat the teachings. That is important, don't get me wrong, but it is a poor excuse for practice. It can never replace practice. Rites and rituals can never replace practice. Today's sutta is a combination. It's a twin sutta. It has a Pathama and Dutiya. Pathama traditionally is, in Pali, is called, it means in English, the first, or part one. And when you have a Pathama, usually the Dutiya comes after. And sometimes you have suttas that are triplets. Then you have Tatiya, and then you have the fourth one. So this one only has two. It is, the first one is Pathama Nidassa Sutta, and the other one obviously is Dutiya Nidassa Sutta. Nidassa is, some English translators use the term graduation, which I'm not too crazy about. Graduation for me reminds me of high school graduation, college, university graduation. Lord Buddha, whenever he gave a teaching, it had to have a relevance, it had to have a purpose, and it had to have a direct connection to the improvement of your life. Your life. It is not time sensitive. Meaning, remember the quality of one of the Dhamma's qualities? Akaliko. Akaliko means it is beyond time. It is timeless. It is no longer time sensitive. Clothing, models, or the fashion is time sensitive. If you dress up the way many of you are dressed up and you go into the, 1970s, you will feel out of place. Or your haircut. Many people will look at you as like, which planet did you come from? So those are very time sensitive. Ideas, many ideas that we hold today are time sensitive, but not the Dhamma. And that we owe to the brilliance of Lord Buddha. Nidassa, therefore, it is about what we understand as a measure of seniority. What is a true senior? What is a person who has the superior quality? And the quality of superiority here is directly connected to who we respect as a true liver, a person who lives the holy path, the holy life, what we call the brahmacharya, the life of a holy person. The Dhamma is that. So Nidassa is referring to that, not just graduation. The person has elevated themselves. So this is happening in both suttas. One is happening in Savatthi, which is this one. And the other one, I believe, I forgot, it probably was in Vesali, or I translated it last week, so both of them. And one is with Venerable Ananda, the other one is with Venerable Sariputta. Venerable Sariputta, you know, he was the second only to the Buddha in his wisdom. He was that wise. So he is going, he gets up early in the morning, so he wants to go to Pindapada. So for alms rounds, you can imagine he was hungry and he had been meditating most probably. So he got up a little bit earlier than the villagers. So he gets up and he's like, I think it's too early to go to the village because most people are still preparing food or they're sleeping. So he says, why don't I go to the monastery of the other sects, the other religious practitioners, paribhajakas and all those, naked ascetics, sometimes they're called. So they were always busy, those guys. They were always arguments, debates, there was always some action going on. And they were welcome in those days. Bhikkhus of different sects, they could go and visit each other. So there was no like, you stay over there, we stay here, type of a thing. This is our territory. It was more tolerant society at large in India. I think to some extent even today, in many parts of India. So Venerable Sariputta decides to go to the ascetics of the other sects, and then there's a discussion. And there is where the interesting conversation is taking place of what constitutes, what makes up a person who is truly a senior. Who is truly a person whom we should respect as a person who's living the holy life. What is the standard? What is the yardstick? What is the benchmark, basically? And then we see how, despite the level of wisdom that Venerable Sariputta had and the prestige that he had, he doesn't get into an argument. He doesn't say yes, nor does he reject. Instead, he quietly says, I wonder what the Blessed One has to say about this criterion, this benchmark, this measure that these guys have. And then he goes and he encounters Lord Buddha after lunch and he shares what he had seen and Lord Buddha's response we hear. So that's the background of what we will do and go over. So, Pathama Nidassa Sutta, a true measure for seniority, part 1. And by the way, if you would like, I can make a PDF version of this, if you'd like to see it and read it, and I could send it to Brother Leslie. By the way, I have to, again, I feel the need to constantly pause at one point or another and thank Brother Leslie. Because of him, well, I'm here. That says it all. Because of him, he insisted. He convinced me to come to Malaysia because of his generosity, because of his kindness and love for the Dhamma. And he saw something valuable that I might be sharing, and he said, Bhante, please come. And this series of suttas, also, we owe it to him. And we have to thank Brother Leslie for this again and again. And please have him and his loved one in your mind, in your heart, as you are finding these sessions to be truly beneficial to you. Indeed, Sadhu. So, let us begin. So this is from the Angutta Nikaya, Book of the Sevens, Sutta number 42. The following one is 43. Book of the Sevens. And by the way, the Anguttara or numerical discourses, we call them numerical by the factor of 1. So numerical, it's easier to remember. When you hear the Book of Sevens, Book of Fours, Book of 11, what you will find are a listing of qualities that will fall into 7 or 11, depending on what book it is found in. So that way you can know this might be book 4, book of the 7th. So you're going to see 7 qualities being listed here. So let's go. One morning, the Venerable Sariputta, having put on his robes, and by taking his alms bowl and outer robe, entered Savatthi for alms. Then it occurred to the Venerable Sariputta, "It is still too early to go for the alms round. What if I go to the monastery of the wandering ascetics of other sects?" So the Venerable Sariputta entered the monastery of the wandering ascetics, and having exchanged friendly greetings with the wandering ascetics of other sects, he sat to one side. Now, while those wandering ascetics of other sects were assembled there, the following conversation took place. "Friends, whoever leads the holy life by completing 12 years living in its purity is to be recognized as a senior bhikkhu." 12 years. So the standard for these people was 12 years. In order for them to be called, so now you're a graduate. So now you are someone that we can respect. Okay? So now we can respect this person as recognized as a senior bhikkhu. As a senior bhikkhu. One of distinction. One of distinction. And someone who has, as we say in English, made the cut. So you have made the cut. So now you're okay, we can converse with you. You're superior in this position. You're somebody now, because you've hit that mark. Witnessing this conversation taking place among the wandering ascetics of the other sects. By the way, if I'm going fast, let me know. I will slow it down. But essentially, I have already explained the gist of it. But, if I'm going too slow, let me know. The Venerable Sariputta neither was delighted by agreeing to it, nor showed any disgust or displeasure by rejecting it. Instead, he simply got up from his seat and went away, thinking to himself, "I will find out the truth about this matter from the Blessed One himself." And that is what a true student does. Despite the fact that this is the general of the Dhamma. King of the Dhamma was Lord Buddha. The general of the Dhamma was known to be Venerable Sariputta. He didn't say, I don't agree. No, he said, let me go and check with Lord Buddha. The humility was superb. And he is the example par excellence for all bhikkhus. He should be anyhow, for all of us to emulate. Later, the Venerable Sariputta, having wandered for alms in Savatthi, and after taking his meal, he returned to the monastery and went straight to the Blessed One. And having paid homage to the Blessed One, he sat to one side and reported to him what had taken place earlier that day, while also adding, "Bhante, is it correct or possible that within this Dhamma and discipline, Dhamma and Vinaya, of the Tathagata, we may recognize a bhikkhu as one of seniority, someone of true distinction, and who has made the cut simply by counting the number of vassas he has spent?" This is the response, the $1 billion response, as they say in some places. "Sariputta, it is neither correct nor possible that within this Dhamma and discipline, meaning the sasana, of the Tathagata, that one may be recognized as a bhikkhu, as one of seniority, someone of true distinction, and who has made the cut by simply counting the number of vassas he has spent." Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with vassas are rains, the rains retreat, we call it. And that was something that we also, Lord Buddha adopted from other traditions. Jains, last week we were talking about the differences and similarities. In Jainism, And some other sects, in India, for example, it happens to be the monsoon season at a certain time of the year, where it rains profusely, a lot, for several months. So during that time, the bhikkhus, the Buddhist monks, were still going about pindapada. They were going on alms round, walking through fields, and sometimes slipping, sometimes falling, but mostly walking on tiny little newly growing, sprouting grass shoots of maybe rice, growing, and things like that. The giants, who were being supported by their lay followers, and many of these lay followers who switched camps, and they actually went and became Buddhists because of what they saw the teaching to be a lot higher and more sublime in the Dhamma. So they became now Buddhist themselves, practitioners of the Dhamma. But this was not sitting well with them. So they went to Lord Buddha and they said, Bhante, we're accustomed to see our holy ones, our spiritual leaders, our monks, to not be walking and maybe even killing all these animals that might be submerged under so much water, the mud and all this new life. And because Lord Buddha saw the value of the lay supporters, and most importantly, because he also saw the value of a bhikkhu to stay put, instead of going around looking for food, many of them were actually getting lazy, not practicing. Because walking around, in Thai tradition they call it tudong, or just going on traveling in the fields in different countrysides, so you see a lot of things. That is much more appealing to the mind than to sit in meditation still, quietly. So Lord Buddha said, this will be great on both ends. So it's a win-win situation, if you like. So he said, bhikkhus, from now on, during these monsoon months, you're not allowed to leave the monastery. And over time, there were some rules added, and now it is 7 days, etc. You cannot leave, etc. So Lord Buddha had to come up with amendments, tiny little things to tweak the rules. But the rules were made simply as a way to ease the pressure and to take away the suffering and to help promote the nibbanic experience of the bhikkhu, so that the bhikkhu can make the most of the time as they are staying put in the monastery during those 3/4 months, because it usually goes from July to early October. That became the Vassa. So, and I'll also mention how I'll tell you that later as we come to it. So, so far so good? You're following? Perfect. In our practice, in our tradition of Theravada, despite the fact that you might be talking about Theravada from Burma or Myanmar, Theravada tradition from Thailand, from Sri Lanka, Cambodia, here and there, even in the West now, there is this very strong attachment that we have to the role of Vassa. It is like those badges. If you see two soldiers come together, military men, they are reading the signs. They are, without even asking, they look at the markings on their stripes. They know how many stripes means what, and who is the superior. We have become, as Buddhist monks, in the same manner, accustomed to looking at those stripes as, oh, so you're superior, or oh, I am the superior. And sometimes, because we don't have actual visible stripes, we have to ask. Not all of us. Many people, though, ask. Because they need to know who's the superior, who is at the higher echelon, who is at the top of the hierarchy. Which we will see, as pointed out here in Lord Buddha's response, that is not the measure of a true senior person. So, Sariputta, having realized the truth in this statement myself, with direct understanding, I now declare these 7 attributes, whereby a bhikkhu may be recognized as one of seniority, one of true distinction, and someone who has made the cut. And what are these 7? Remember, this is a book of 7, so it will have 7 qualities. Here, Sariputta, the bhikkhu has keen desire to undertake the training. The training. What is the training? Dhamma. Dhamma is training, it's practice, it's doing. It's applying the teachings in your life. That makes it a practice. It's a training, patipada. It's not just pariyatti, which is studying. It combines it into a training. That's why imagine you put soap on your hands and your hands are dirty. Is that going to clean it? You can stay like that for 100 years and the soap will not clean your hands. You need to rub them together. That is the training. What oftentimes is called also tapas. The heat, the energy that needs to be applied, hence patipada. It's a training, it's a practice of doing. So Lord Buddha says the bhikkhu has to have the keen desire to practice. You never take it for granted. Oh, I'm in robes, so okay, I'm good. In addition to having the keen desire within the same quality, Lord Buddha adds, without losing his love to undertake the training in the future. So it's not temporary. You're not saying, only this time, this Vassa, I'm going to really dedicate myself, and after that, I'm going to go and travel to Europe or America, and I'm just going to be happy. I'm just continue being a bhikkhu and just be okay, but not practice. Why are we bhikkhus? That's what Lord Buddha is saying. You need to maintain that keen desire to undertake the training. That is the first quality that Lord Buddha lists. It's interesting. Second, the bhikkhu has a strong desire to keep himself true and close to the Dhamma. True and close to the Dhamma. Without deviating from it, without going off into some other area. Without losing his love for keeping himself true and close to the Dhamma, without deviating from it in the future. So, now and the future, he says, you need to have this keen desire and you have to maintain this course. In America, the university where I actually got my doctorate in Buddhist ministry, and I've studied there. My PhD actually took 15 years to finish. I had a professor, his PhD took, his doctoral program, his dissertation took 10 years. And when I was studying with him years ago, I would say, wow, 10 years, that's such a long time. Little did I know that mine was going to take 5 more years. So I don't know of anyone who spent that many years on their dissertation. But anyhow, it was well worth it for me because I learned so much in the process. But the reason why I mentioned the university is this. I notice a lot of bhikkhus from different parts of Asia coming. And I also know some who go to community colleges, both to that university and to community colleges in Los Angeles and I'm sure around the world. And I have come to see individuals, bhikkhus, studying economics. One bhikkhu at the university was studying MBA, for an MBA, Master's in Business Administration. Why? Why in the world is a bhikkhu studying business administration? A bhikkhu has no place with such a thing. Unfortunately, this is, I'm pointing something out that is still benign compared to some other majors that I've seen people go to pursue education in. Why? Why am I even in robes? Do you see any of those two qualities yet? If the person has the keen desire to practice the patipada, the training, they have no time to go ahead and learn about the business principles of how to make more money, how to become more economical, how to open up a franchise, how to learn about taxes and accounting. There's that too, by the way. Again, I don't want it to be a critique of individuals, but more so a critique of how we treat the Dhamma, because it's upon us. It's not against individuals. It is about us, especially the laity, to see what is what and what your position has to be. Because the laity is absolutely also responsible, just as the bhikkhus are, to maintain and to keep the health of the sasana. So we have to answer to you, the laity. So please bear that in mind. The bhikkhu has a strong desire in subduing and eradicating, pulling from the roots, any lingering vain wishes. Vain means empty, superficial wishes from his heart, without losing his love for subduing and eradicating any lingering vain wishes from his heart in the future. Means that I, as a bhikkhu, cannot think about, oh, if I can only find a way to have a bigger temple, to have a car, to have a bigger supporter, to have a this or that. That's not my place. That's why I left lay life, you know. My life as a bhikkhu has to be dedicated to the Dhamma and to the propagation of the Dhamma, to the practice of the Dhamma, to help the Dhamma from becoming decrepit, from losing itself, its beauty, to make sure that it's sustained for future generations. Look at the wisdom of Lord Buddha, that he saw this thousands of years ago. He's talking about vain wishes. I mean, why do we shave our heads? Some of us shave our eyebrows. We don't want any extra unnecessary things for people to point at and say, oh, he has nice eyebrows. Yeah, I've seen bhikkhus, mahatheras, who extend their eyebrows and they even do this. Something to set themselves apart from other bhikkhus. Well, that's why Lord Buddha gave us one design. One robe, go ahead. Go pick it up from the cremation ground. Oh, you want a nice plate? Okay, here's the clay bowl. Go ahead. In fact, you can't change the clay bowl until they actually have so many dents it has to crack. Because you have bhikkhus who started to look for, well, your bowl looks better. Or your robe looks better. I want some of that. Oh, your supporters. How come I don't have supporters? All of these are vain wishes. We need to be reminded of these gem of suttas, because these were said, told by Lord Buddha for a reason. For a reason, to keep the sasana alive. The bhikkhu is still listing the qualities. The bhikkhu has a strong desire for seclusion. Seclusion. Without losing his love for seclusion in the future. You have in other places in the Angutta Nikaya where Lord Buddha clearly states What are the qualities of a bhikkhu who is to be respected? One of them is his desire to be secluded. Second is his sila. How well do you keep your sila? I wish bhikkhus would start asking each other that. I wish we start asking each other, the bhikkhus, instead of how many vassas do you have? How is your sila, Bhante? That's a good question. Or how is your samadhi, Bhante? That would be lovely. or what is the level of your attainment, Bhante? If we look at Lord Buddha's teachings, we see that he gives us permission to ask. In the Book of Fives, Lord Buddha lists them. 5 qualities. 5 qualities that make you say to yourself, you know what, I should bow to this bhikkhu. Why? Because he's been a bhikkhu for X amount of years, many, many years, 12 years, 10 years, 25 years, 50 years? Or something else that you know is hard to do, keeping your precepts, being generous, forgiving someone, having hiri and ottappa. You might have heard of those terms. I like to translate those as wise moral shame. And I learned this from a fellow bhikkhu, Ajahn Jayasaro, from the Thai forest tradition. I liked his explanation of these two, and I've adopted. And I always make sure I give him credit, Ajahn. So the hiri would be wise moral shame, and ottappa would be wise moral consideration. So what is the difference? Because there's that dirty word almost, shame. One would be how you view yourself. If I were to do this, does it sit well with me? Do I feel good about having done this? Or do I find myself full of regrets afterwards? That is the shame that one has towards oneself for having done something that is akusala, breaking of a precept. Now, ottappa, so one is more internally based, internally focused, directed at you, hiri. Ottappa is more, has a more of an external trajectory. It looks at others, but not just any others. You start thinking about people that you hold valuable to you, respect. A teacher. How about Lord Buddha? If Lord Buddha was alive, if my teacher was alive, or if my teacher knew that I was doing this, let's say you're alone, no one knows who you are, you're completely, no one can find out what you're about to do. And you know that you're breaking a precept. But you're convincing yourself because you have passed the hiri boundary. So you've somehow convinced yourself that this is okay. Ottappa comes as the second defense line and says, yeah, but imagine if Bhante so-and-so, imagine if Venerable Sariputta was present. If Lord Buddha was sitting there, watching me, would I still do this? Usually, if it's an unwholesome act, the answer is immediate. Some of my students have asked me, Bhante, is it appropriate for a bhikkhu to smoke cigarettes, cigars? I've seen people smoke cigars, monks. I know in Thai forest tradition, in Sri Lanka, in Burma, people smoke these things. And for me, it was shocking to see one of a bhikkhu that I respected at the time, years ago, smoking, hiding somewhere. And I thought, okay. But I had a difficulty with that image. And then I've heard from ajahns in the Thai forest tradition talking about different ajahns, Ajahn Chah, this, that, whom they consider to be arahants, very well-known teachers, smoking. And they're okay with that. And I said, I'm okay to some extent with you being okay with that, but I am not okay as far as the Dhamma is concerned. Why? Because I am having a hard time visualizing Lord Buddha smoking a cigar. It doesn't register. I cannot visualize it. Call me crazy. It doesn't work. My mind, my brain cells do not connect to make that a possibility. There you go. That is your ottappa. Ottappa will say, no way. So, the bhikkhu has to have those qualities in order for them to be respected, deserving of being called someone who's living the brahmacharya, the holy life. And that's only from the Book of Fives. Book of Fours also, Book of Sixes, every single book, and I'm just talking about the Angutta Nikaya, numerical discourses. The suttas are full of suttas where Lord Buddha is talking to us, saying, be careful, have a standard. Have a standard. You have standards. As lay people, these buildings that were made, they had to go through different measurements, right? Permits. The city, legal, all these different individuals' bodies had to say yes to this, no to that. It had to measure up. Somebody from the street didn't come up and say, yeah, I want to build a building. Yeah. No, you have to know how an architect thinks. You need to know physics, calculus, trigonometry, and then you have to pass through all these measures. And you're a layperson. You're the one who's bowing down to the bhikkhu. So, you're a professional. You have standards. We have standards that we have to follow. So that's what we're seeing here about the Vassa, or the qualities. So, next, the bhikkhu has a strong desire for arousing effort without losing his love for arousing effort in the future. The bhikkhu always has to come up with effort. We call it virya. You cannot become weak and say, you know what? 5 months of the year I can be with virya. The rest, yeah, it's okay. I'll be on a vacation. In America, of course, nowadays every bhikkhu has a cell phone. I see fellow bhikkhus going to, especially before COVID, even now, going to Las Vegas, taking pictures, nice national parks here, there, everywhere. Europe, the same thing. Why? I'm just asking why. Could that be considered in your mind, after what you've heard Lord Buddha say, as a vain wish? As a vain interest? Why am I taking selfies in front of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas? Why? And unless my Facebook page is serving the Dhamma, is letting know of the Dhamma, why do I even have a Facebook page? For example, because if I have a Facebook page, it means that I need to spend time off the cushion and in front of a computer. My time in front of the computer has to be for the Dhamma. Yes, also when I'm eating the bowl of food that you gave me, it has to be for the Dhamma. So we need to be more critical. Go beyond what this thing, because today what we have is the world of bhikkhus. We have begun, for many centuries actually, looking at Vassas as the measure. We are no longer talking about other sects, believing that it's 12 years. This is not about other sects. This is about the bhikkhus in the Theravada tradition. We have terms for them. Mahatera, after you hit a certain marker, you graduate. In different cultures, like in Thai forest tradition, they have different ones. You automatically become an Ajahn after 10 years. Whether you were a wallflower, a chair, or a monk, you automatically, because you've spent 10 years in robes. Well, what was I doing for 10 years in robes? Maybe I was studying economics or doing my MBA. What is that? I have to deserve the food that you bring me. I have to deserve the dwelling that you provide me. That is the measure of a bhikkhu. That's how I am supposed to think as a bhikkhu. Not, how many vassas do I have? Which, by the way, since my ordination, every time I see a new bhikkhu, that's what they ask. Yesterday, another person asked me. So every day I try to come up with a new way of entertaining myself. While staying true to the Dhamma. Because there's a level of mediocrity. The world is full of mediocrity. But we don't have to take and bring that mediocrity into us, into our sacred space. The sasana, we have to protect it in this very difficult time where everything is mixing, so-called integrating. We're losing the sasana, the teachings. And many people are leaving. You go to Asia, you go to Sri Lanka, you go to Thailand, you go to Burma, people are leaving their temples. And it's not the fault of the lay people. They are disheartened. They have lost their inspiration. Many of them, unfortunately, have lost their faith. They're becoming Christian, they're becoming Muslim, or they're even worse, they're losing their faith in, well, they're becoming atheist or something. This is a way for us to look back at ourselves, both as bhikkhus and as lay people. Are we living a truly Buddhist life? Meaning, according to the teachings, not because of tradition, whatever that means. The bhikkhu has a strong desire for maintaining careful and discriminating mindfulness. Aha! Sati! Sampajanya. Are you with mindfulness? Or are you walking around with your arms flailing? Even an elephant or a giraffe, when it moves, or a horse, or a cow, when it flicks its tail with its long hairs on its tail, it does so strategically. You might even say mindfully, to whisk the flies away from its body. I consider that animal more mindful than many of us. We're not aware where our feet are located when we're walking. We cannot teach, for example, there are rules, as bhikkhus in the Vinaya. You cannot teach with your hands standing like this. You can't do that. And it's not just when we're teaching Dhamma. But people are like programmed animals, like robots, I'm sorry. We never think that, why did Lord Buddha say this? Because there's a certain beauty, regalness, nobility when we talk Dhamma, especially when we practice the Dhamma. So that has to be embodied in our bodies. Physically, we have to demonstrate that. Nowhere do you see Lord Buddha sitting like, nowhere do you see him walking without awareness. He always, could you turn it off, please, or mute it? So every time Lord Buddha walked in and out of a room, he always stepped with his right foot. Now, some people ask me, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is it compared to a left foot? Is there a difference? No, just relax. It was just his mindfulness was there. The way he ate his morsels of food. the way he turned his gaze. He never did this. He had the elephant's turn, they call it. The elephant's body turns like this. So whatever the chest, the whole body turns. Which means, if you've studied anything about thousands of years later, we have neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And in psychotherapy, when we observe a patient, you're watching their body language. And a way that you can tell a person that you care about and you're truly, truly, truly listening to them is if you fully listen with your body leaning into them. You're showing them both your shoulders, your face, your chest is like turned towards them. What is that? He didn't do this mindlessly. So does the bhikkhu have these qualities? How about when they're eating? Are they shoving down food in their mouth? Because we also have rules for that. But the rules were meant for people who could not understand the Dhamma. In one of the suttas on the horse trainer, again, that's also from the Angutta Nikaya. Lord Buddha one time has a horse trainer come and listen to Lord Buddha's talking. And the Lord Buddha asks him, how do you train your horses? And the man says, I have 4 methods. There are some horses who see me and all of a sudden they shape up. They get their composure. They listen to me and they are orderly, disciplined, immediately because they know me. There's a second kind of horse, he says, that I have to pull out my whip. Only when they see me use the whip do they get to shape up. And then there's the third kind of horse, he says, that I have to really hit and even pierce the skin, the flesh, and even reach the bone for the horse to listen to me. And he says there's a fourth kind of a horse, and that is a useless horse, which ends up being meat, so I have to kill him. Because I have to get those horses to go to the king. I can't give the king a horse that is rebellious, doesn't listen, so I don't make money. The king might even die riding the horse. So that's a totally useless horse, he says. Lord Buddha says. And the horse trainer asks Lord Buddha, how do you train your bhikkhus? And he says, exactly the same way. The horse trainer is surprised. Like, what do you mean, Bhante? And he says, there are bhikkhus where when they see me already, they are very disciplined. They don't need rules. And you had 1,250 arahants. When we have the Magga Puja, they came all together without announcement. 1,250 arahants never actually had to be taught a single precept. Because they knew the Dhamma in their hearts. It's redundant. So those are the first bhikkhus, Lord Buddha says. The second bhikkhu is, I have to discipline them with rules. That's like the horse that sees the whip. And then there's the third one that has to be disciplined even more, where they need to be punished. If you remember Channa, Lord Buddha, before Siddhartha, he was the charioteer. And he was, after Lord Buddha died, he was disciplined by, I call it given the silent treatment, where they ignored him, all of the Sangha, because he was very snobbish and very arrogant. He never practiced. And that changed him, and he became an arahant. He practiced. And Lord Buddha says there's which basically actually that was the fourth one I just gave you, of Chanda's example. He says there's the fourth one where the bhikkhu gets to be like killed. He doesn't use those words, but basically inference, you understand it is that. And the man is like, Bhante, don't say that, you're a holy person. How could you kill your bhikkhu? And he says, that's not, it's metaphorically used. And he gives them the example that for a bhikkhu being, in a way, almost excommunicated, as they say in other traditions, or completely shunned, given the silent treatment where no one says hello to you, everyone ignores you, it is like death. It's like the fourth horse. Now, if the bhikkhu is ready to change, they will change. Otherwise, they will leave. Last week, Brother Leslie had organized the Tipitaka talk, if you remember. And in it, I mentioned how in the third council, we had Moggaliputta Tissatera. Because of him, we had the third council, and because of him, the Dhamma that we have today, to some level still available, we owe it to him. Because he was a true Arahant. But he had exiled himself in seclusion in the mountains for some time because the Dhamma was corrupted, the Sangha was corrupted. He said, this is crazy, no one is listening to me. This is not the path of Lord Buddha, and he left. This was happening at Emperor Ashoka's time. In the third council happened because of Emperor Ashoka wanting to help the Sasana. So, if Venerable Moggaliputta Tissatera was alive today, unfortunately, he would be again discouraged because he would see the same situation again happening. So, yeah, just some thoughts there. So the bhikkhu has a strong desire for maintaining careful and discriminating mindfulness without losing his love for maintaining and careful and discriminating mindfulness in the future. Over time, what the Sangha, in the Sangha, monks had come up with is this distinction, this separation where they have one group separated itself as we are the scholarly type monks, scholarly, academic, so we know more Dhamma, or we study the suttas, we memorize the suttas, we chant the suttas. And then there are you guys over there. You are the meditating monks. Nowhere in the suttas do you see this distinction by Lord Buddha. Now you had some bhikkhus who claimed themselves, but Lord Buddha never officiated it. Never granted authority to it. He would make fun of them. There are two brothers, two brothers who both became bhikkhus. One brother, the older, who was a teacher of Dhamma, he knew suttas very well. He knew how to do expositions, explain things. But when it came to the practice of what he was teaching, he was clueless. His younger brother, who becomes a bhikkhu later, quickly takes an object of meditation from Lord Buddha, practices, and he becomes an Arahant. Years pass, and Lord Buddha, every time he saw the older brother, he would call him what? He wouldn't call him my very excellent, wise bhikkhu. He would not call him that. He would say, here comes the idiot. Here comes the old stupid one. This is Lord Buddha talking to this bhikkhu, who's supposedly a Mahatera, who's supposedly very wise with the suttas. And here is his younger brother, who's an Arahant, sitting there. For years, this person hears this and he gets offended, but it's Lord Buddha saying it, so he keeps his mouth shut and he walks away. It's embarrassing, as you can imagine. Because you have students who are turning Arahants, but you yourself are not practicing. So finally, as my mother used to say, the knife reached the bone for this person. And he finally gets it. And he says, I have to learn how to meditate. I have to practice. So he goes from one bhikkhu to the next, his level. He was a Mahatera, so he goes to other equal Vassa people. Because they knew that he was a snob, he was arrogant, nobody would teach him. Because his nose was up in the air. He was like, I'm better than you. So nobody teaches him. So he goes from one place to the next. He even asks Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha sends him to someone else. And that person also says, you're hopeless. Until he finds a 7-year-old novice monk, a little boy, who was an arahant, by the way. And that boy, that little monk, who didn't have any facial hair, teaches him a lesson about humility. This was a man who knew the suttas, all these things. He would memorize, he would know. He had to crawl and do exactly what this young 7-year-old novice monk was teaching him. How many bhikkhus do you know who can do that today? How many mahatheras do you know who can actually do that? Or even can allow themselves mentally to do that? Very good question. I don't have an answer to that. Kind of leaning towards the negative, but, you know, unfortunately. But he, fortunately, becomes an arahant because he understands that that is not the way. So there is no separation of a scholarly monk and a meditative monk. But people still believe that. There's no evidence of that in the suttas being given permission by Lord Buddha. That it's okay, you guys go over there, study the suttas, you're fine. And you can sit there and chant every day saying, may he attain supreme nibbana one day. Why one day? What's wrong with now? You're alive now. Why are we praying now? May we... Are we praying? Are we like the Catholics, Christians? Are we like this or other religions? Not to mean any disrespect towards them, but this is the Dhamma. We don't have prayer. We practice. We see the benefit now. Sanditthiko, it's directly visible now in this body, right now, this one that you're habiting. Who knows if there's going to be sasana when I show up? Maybe I show up like an elephant, I don't know. Or I show up as a cripple, a quadriplegic. Or I have some problem with my head, my brain, I don't have necessary punya, merits to think. What if I come back in a time where it's absolute darkness, where there is no Dhamma at all? What is this? May he attain, may I attain supreme Nibbana in a future life. This is Adhamma. Adhamma. Because the person has to be encouraged to practice now. Now. Not hope for a future state of Nibbana. It doesn't happen. Nibbana doesn't happen in the future. It happens now, in this body. And that's what Lord Buddha is saying, again and again. The bhikkhu has a strong desire to penetrate into right view, without losing his love for penetrating into right view in the future. And when we hear the words right view, samma ditthi, what we are talking about is not just having the right view as, oh, this is part of the Eightfold Path. This right view that Lord Buddha is talking about is the person having attained at least the Sotapanna stage. Because once the person has experienced Sotapatti, which is the first level of awakening, even path, Magga, not even Phala, the path stage of awakening of the first level, you have reached the point of no return. There's no way. You have a kind of faith that is unprecedented. You can never break sila again. Or hide. If you accidentally break it or somehow, you will not be able to hide it. You will come out and say it. You have seen Nibbana. Just a glimpse, but enough to set you apart from everyone else who has not tasted it. That is right view. Right view cannot be taught in a book. It has to be experienced, and it doesn't come through rites and rituals like pujas. Pujas are, I was mentioning this to a student overseas, pujas are like, have you seen a cat play with a toy? Like a ball of twine? They like to play. I know when my nieces and nephews were babies, we would buy them things, glimmering, glistening things, things that move over the bed. They would play with them. They're like that. Pujas are like that. Keeps entertaining us. Ultimately, they don't get you to Nibbana. Not even this close. But we do it because it is helpful for the center. It makes you feel good about because you do dana. It keeps the lights on. It keeps the rent paid. And it gives you this sense of community. So it has some benefits, The problem is when we look at the puja as the reason why we come to the temple. There was never any pujas at the time of Lord Buddha. People did not come and just do pujas. They used to come, pay their respect, sit down quietly, especially if they're offering food. Lord Buddha would eat. He would make sure everyone's eaten as well. And then he would give a Dhamma desana, a Dhamma talk. That's it. And you would have Sotapannas, Anagamis, Sakadagamis, of course, and Arahants in that crowd, just because their mind was in the right place. Their heart was in the right place. So we need to know what is Dhamma, what is Adhamma. My belief that rites and rituals or pujas are going to take me to Nibbana is Adhamma. This is not Dhamma. Has nothing to do with Lord Buddha's teachings. Otherwise, it's like priestcraft. You see that in Christianity. What's the difference? Nothing. Rites and rituals. I used to be Christian. I used to serve at a church. At 15, I went to a Christian monastery to become a Christian monk. I saw rites and rituals. I was asking, there was no exposure to Dhamma. I didn't have Dhamma there in Lebanon. Not even a single book. There was no websites, no internet. Not a single word of Dhamma. One time, one of my priest or monk teachers, professors in the monastery said something derogatory towards the Dhamma. It hurt me. He said, that is why Christianity is better than Buddhism, because Christianity has love. Buddhism has just compassion. He made that face too. And I said, that's not true. I didn't know how, but I knew in my heart what he was saying was wrong. And I knew exactly where I was sitting in the classroom. I was sitting far left part of the last chair in the classroom. And he was standing right next to the blackboard, next to the door. I was, I think, 16 or 17. I said, this is not my place. Because everything else revolved around rites and rituals. And I said, my life is not going to be a slave to rites and rituals and beliefs. There's got to be something out there for me. And I found it. And I've been trying to show it to everyone. Because Lord Buddha's Dhamma is alive. It is not in pujas. I can tell you that for sure. It is every time you make an offering with your big fat smile on your face, your heart wide open. When you sit completely open in your heart and you meditate, there's a chance that the Dhamma is going to come up right there. That's why it's so important for us to listen. Listen with your heart. Don't lose your sati. Don't lose your sila. Otherwise, it's just rites and rituals. What's the difference between Dhamma and other religions out there? Judaism is all about rites and rituals. Islam is all about that. Christianity is all about that. And many people will say, rightfully, Buddhism is all about that too, based on what they're saying. But what I'm saying is, that is not how it's supposed to be. That's not Lord Buddha's Dhamma. Let's change that, at least in our attitudes. Sariputta, when the bhikkhu is endowed with these 7 attributes, then he is declared to be living the purity of the holy life in its completeness. He doesn't say anything about Vassa. Now, not even 1 year. Let's see what he's going to say. Therefore, such a bhikkhu may be recognized as one of seniority if he has these qualities. He's already senior, he says. If he has these qualities. One is, so he is to be recognized as one of seniority, one of true distinction, and who has made the cut, even if he has not lived the holy life for 12 years, let alone 36 years, or even 48 years. For he indeed is to be called one of true distinction, a senior bhikkhu, the one who has made the cut, without any doubts. So you can go without any doubts, accept that person as a true senior in the lineage of bhikkhus that we get from Lord Buddha to this day. I hope that gives you some ideas about seniority. Hopefully a new perspective, because this is coming from this is not what I call a bumper sticker Dhamma. Most of us, in America, you have cars, and behind the cars, people put bumper stickers. I don't know, probably here too. People put signs, some words, some phrases. You see it also on Facebook and social media. Such and such a thing was said by the Buddha, for example. 80% of it is not true. But people, or Satguru or Deepak Chopra type of a thing, people use these terms without any training behind it, any practice behind it, any life behind it. So my efforts here are all about helping us to come to the Dhamma proper without telling ourselves lies and making others believe it either. So this is the Pathama Nidassa Sutta. So now I'm going to go over the Dutiya Nidassa Sutta. Again, the structure is the same. I'm sure the formulators of the sutta kind of combined it because it has certain elements. Because Venerable Ananda one day is at the gathering of ascetics, wandering ascetics, other of sects, and they also are talking about the same theme. Who is the senior? And he doesn't say a word, he gets up and he leaves, and later on he goes to Lord Buddha. And so I'm just going to abbreviate, jumping straight to the portion where Venerable Ananda is asking the question from Lord Buddha. So this was, I'm sorry, earlier I said Vesali, but this was actually in Kosambi with Venerable Ananda's sutta here, with Dutiya Nidassa Sutta. This one is Angutta Nikaya, book 7, so 7.43. The first one was 7.42, Angutta Nikaya. So I won't read the first part because it's very identical, pretty much. So I'll just jump into the section where it says about Venerable Ananda coming to Lord Buddha. Later, the Venerable Ananda, having wandered for alms in Kosambi, and after taking his meal, he returned to the monastery and went straight to the Blessed One. And having paid homage to him, he sat to one side and reported to him what had taken place earlier that day, while also adding, Bhante, is it correct or possible that within this Dhamma and discipline of the Tathagata, we may recognize a bhikkhu as one of seniority, someone of true distinction, and who has made the cut simply by counting the number of vassas he has spent? And again, Venerable Lord Buddha says to Venerable Ananda, Ananda, it is neither correct nor possible. Neither correct nor possible. There's no chance, he's saying, that within this Dhamma and discipline of the Tathagata, one may recognize a bhikkhu as one of seniority, someone of true distinction, and who has made the cut by simply counting the number of vassas he has spent. Ananda, having realized the truth in this statement myself with direct understanding, I now declare these 7 attributes. whereby a bhikkhu may be recognized as one of seniority, one of true distinction, and who has made the cut. And what are these 7? Here, Ananda, the bhikkhu possesses wise moral shame. In this sutta you see Hiri, the one I was mentioning earlier. He possesses wise moral consideration, the attitude of, I wonder what would my teacher think of me if he saw that I was doing this. That's ottappa. So you're never truly alone in your mind. You're mindful. That's why you're reminding yourself, wait a minute, I have all the possibility to break this sila. No one will know, ever. There's no cameras, nothing. But what would my teacher say if he found out? That's enough. Boom, it stops for such a person. He has carefully listened to the Dhamma and continues to do so. He is unrelenting, driven, energetic in his training. He is mindful and he is wise. So here we see slight differences in the traits or the qualities, the 7 qualities, compared to the earlier sutta. That's why I wanted to present them both, because they complete each other. Ananda, when the bhikkhu is endowed with these 7 attributes, then he is declared to be living the purity of the holy life in its completeness. Therefore, such a bhikkhu may be recognized as one of seniority, one of true distinction, and who has made the cut. Even if he has not lived the holy life for 12 years, let alone 36 years, or even 48 years, for he is to be called one of true distinction, a senior bhikkhu, the one who has made the cut without any doubts. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. These are important sounds that we hear from the suttas. And unfortunately, you have to dig to find these suttas. You don't see them, you don't hear them being mentioned in talks, online even. You hear about other suttas that are well known. But they shouldn't be. They should be there for us. Everything we need pretty much is found in the Dhamma. There's an answer somewhere for our problems and issues. We don't need to think that that's it. The Buddha lived in a different era. He cannot relate to what is happening to me now. That's not true. I've never come across a situation in my life where the Dhamma was not helpful. And I don't think I happen to be a singular case. I think it is for every one of us. Every one of us. So, as far as I can see, the job, the purpose of being a bhikkhu is for us to become arahants. This is not idealistic. The reason why Lord Buddha wore the robes instead of the royal outfit, the reason why he shaved off his hair, he gave up his jewelry, his wife, his child, was not to attain some vassas, to attain renown, honor, fame, to have a bigger temple. He was about to be king. That same premise, that same objective, the way I see, should be, must be, underline must. And these days people are not, politically correct, they don't want to use the words must or should. I use it all the time, wholesale. The reason for us to be bhikkhus is for at the very least to become a sotapanna. And I cannot be a sotapanna if I am still looking for fame, for renown, for more supporters, for a bigger van for my vihara, which, by the way, I'm trying to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. All I need is a kuti. In fact, if I don't have a kuti, it's okay, a tree, under a tree, that's fine too. That is the method that was followed, started by Lord Buddha. And I don't see a reason why it should be different now. This is not, again, idealistic. This is practical, because there must be reasons other than seeking worldly gain that should be prompting us to get in robes. The robes are not there for hiding. We don't hide things under the robes, metaphorically speaking. A bhikkhu should not have anything to hide in his behavior. A bhikkhu is supposed to be inspiring, and you cannot be inspiring unless you are inspired yourself. And I guarantee you, if you are a person who is inspiring, the laity will never leave you. No one will go and convert into another religion, because you are the embodiment of the Dhamma. They feel good to give you that piece of bread. You know, there was a couple so poor that they only had one piece of garment at the time of Lord Buddha. You might have heard about them. I'm very bad with names, so I keep forgetting names, but I remember the stories. They move me. So this husband and wife, they were so poor, they only had one piece of garment. Think of it as a long shirt. And the husband would wear it one part of the day. He would come back home, take it off, give it to the wife. She would wear it the other part of the day. Now, when they found out that Lord Buddha was visiting their town, and they were both devout, they had so much saddha. I wish today bhikkhus could have that, even 1/16 of that saddha. But she and he had this saddha. And they said, the woman says, husband, why don't I go in the morning and I borrow the shirt, and you go at night and you borrow the shirt, so I'll be at home. But meanwhile, they're actually, it's so lovely. So they go, and they're not even being 100% honest with each other, because they're pretending like they're going to work, to the village, to do things. Meanwhile, they're going to hear more and more Dhamma talks. Until the man, one night, he goes, and everyone's there, including the king. I think King Pasenadi was there with his retinue. And this man is sitting there and he listens, and the Lord Buddha is giving the talk. And Lord Buddha would always scan the room with his mind to see who was ready, who just needed a little bit of a nudge, just a little push for them to attain any of these stages. And he sees this man ready. His heart was ready to be released, to taste Nibbana. And Lord Buddha gives exactly the kind of talk that does the work, does the job for him. And the man, his heart is about to burst with joy. And he realizes that he has to give, he wants to give the shirt as an offering to Lord Buddha. But his mind was saying, you can't, because half of the ownership belongs to your wife, and she's not here. How can I give this thing that doesn't fully belong to me? What are we going to do? We're going to be both naked now. We can't survive. We can't get food. So he's fighting with himself on this. Meanwhile, his dana spirit is really like boiling, until he says, I don't care. My wife also loves the Dhamma, loves Lord Buddha, and I'm sure she will say yes. And he takes off his shirt, now he's completely naked, and he says, I have won! I have vanquished! I'm the victor, he says. And he hands over, he folds the shirt and he puts it in front of, at the feet of Lord Buddha. And Lord Buddha smiles, because that was the thing which was holding him from experiencing Nibbana. Meanwhile, the man is also in tears, and the other bhikkhus who see this quickly go and get a robe that was available, something that was, I think, layperson's robe, and they put it on him to cover him. Now the king is interested. He sees this naked man and he says, who is this person? He just saying he's naked, he's barely has skin on him. What is he vanquished? What is he conquered? I mean, is he rich? He doesn't look rich. So he asks his ministers, go find out. And they go find out the story. And the king is highly impressed. And he says, take this man to the palace. Wash him. In fact, go and get his wife as well. Take them to the palace and dress him in the finest of clothing. He is now my finance minister. So there are different kinds of kamma where the results are immediate. The rarest ones have to do with a Buddha, when a person offers something to a Lord Buddha, or to an Arya Savaka, someone who's a noble disciple, any of the 4 stages. In this case, the man offered the robe, his only item of clothing to Lord Buddha, knowing full well that he wasn't calculating, the king is going to be there, so hopefully he'll see me. Let me put it in myself in such a way where I can advertise myself. Scheming. By the way, a bhikkhu should never be scheming, planning, cunning, deceitful, conceited, jealous, stingy, miserly. These qualities don't belong with these robes. Lord Buddha makes sure of that in countless suttas. So I wanted to share these thoughts and give you some time for questions because I don't want to take the whole time, even though I can go on a little bit more, but I do want to give time for questions because I might have said something that might have triggered something or brought some questions up. Please don't shy away. As long as the question is about the practice, the Dhamma, the Suttas, what you think? Anyone?
You want the question?
No?
Okay, I have one.
Ah, yes. I love it. Leslie always has one.
Only one.
Okay, go ahead.
One day, we come from an environment where it's kind of an urban environment that we live in, right? Especially at least in Buddhist Maha Vihara in KL.
Mm-hmm.
You don't find or ever find a monk of any repute over the many years I've been here to actually say what you mentioned, the values that a bhikkhu should carry in him, or what a good bhikkhu is. So then what happens to us as lay people? How do we practice when the people we look up to already themselves are not practicing what the Buddha taught? So how do we take it from here? We are lucky today that we have you, but you're only here temporarily, you're not here all the time. So we are blessed that you're here to tell us some things that we need to learn and hear. But beyond this, then what happens? How do we take it forth from here?
I'm actually having an emotional reaction to what you said. It's literally, I'm getting gooseflesh as you're saying these words because of the significance of what it is you just shared and the honesty with which you opened up and shared, because this is not something that only is occurring with you here in this room. I believe it is occurring with every one of you. And what I would add to that, please, Leslie, you can sit down, unless you have more follow-up, which you can do from there. What I was saying is, in my travels around the world, in different viharas, I have seen individuals who have, and conversed with individuals who probably at most, and the most daring among them, probably said maybe 25% of what you just shared with us. This is a problem that is global, this is a problem that is universal, and this is a problem that we need to, using an English term, nip it in the bud. We have to take care of it as soon as possible. And you'd be surprised how much power you have as lay people. You are our bhikkhus' life source. What you have, and this is given what we've been experiencing in recent times, and some of which you know personally in regards to my situation as a person, as a bhikkhu. We've discussed this last year's when I gave a Dhamma talk virtually for Buddhist Maha Vihara with the theme of can we investigate our teachers? And Brother Leslie has been kind enough to post it very quickly when I gave it. So it's available on BMV's YouTube channel, where I went all out, which I believe was also the instigator for you to think about, Bhante Candana in Malaysia, is that even possible? That's where I think you had the idea of sharing with me. Now, how does that relate to what you said? Earlier I gave the example of you being lay people. You come from different professions, maybe students, but mostly professionals who have had a professional life with responsible roles. At the very least, being parents. I say very least, but you know how time-consuming and energy-consuming that is. But on top of that, being a professional, running a business. I ran my own business when I was 18. I had my own business. Remember the jewelry design thing? Straight out of high school, at 18 years old, I established my name and started earning a living. This was back in Lebanon, Beirut, after I left the monastery. I know how it is involving for you to think about, okay, do I have enough money in the bank to pay for mortgage? Do I have enough money to get food for my children, to pay for their schooling? How about their college? What if they want to go overseas? If you have a business, you have employees. Well, what if you didn't make any money? Well, you had over 2 years of lockdown, barely able to make ends meet. How are you going to pay rent for your house or mortgage and for your business? Plus, you have employees. You have to pay them, their payroll, taxes and whatnot. Plus, I haven't talked about food. So what I'm talking about is accountability. That is what we are talking about. That is the elephant in the room. Because if I were a layperson, and I was a layperson for many years, and I would see the problem that you just pointed out, and that I've been talking about for almost 2 hours, is the elephant in the room that nobody wanted to talk about. Is the bhikkhu living according to the standards set down by Lord Buddha? The answer was no. But at least there's a bhikkhu. At least there's a temple I can go to. Urban environment. Where else am I going to go? I feel committed to this because it's my parents' tradition, or I have faith in Lord Buddha, something that keeps me. But at the same time, every time I'm there, every time I leave, I feel like I betrayed the Buddha. Every time I feel I betrayed the Dhamma. But this is what my parents did. They made offerings, and I guess this is okay. One day, maybe, when I die, I'm going to experience bliss of Nibbana. All that nonsense. Imagine Lord Buddha saying to his students, Yeah, give the dana, practice some sila, and wish for the next life for you. Yeah, bliss nibbana, nibbana bliss. Yeah, go. Next. That is what's happening. We have eyes, we see, no? Now, when you have a tumor, what do you do? If you're a surgeon, what do you do? Yep. You gentlemen over there, you cut it out. Well, that's not unique to one person. We all agree to that. If you have an employee that doesn't work, but every month, every week, or every 2 weeks, you pay them their salary. But they don't work. They come and sit. Or you have a tutor. Some of us had tutors, maybe. You go to school and you need an extra help. You hire someone. Teach me computers. Teach me this. Imagine the person comes and you pay them $50 a month or whatever it is, and you still get a bad grade. Or you don't learn the foreign language. What do? Do you still keep them? Or do you fire them? That is what Venerable Moggaliputta Tissa did. Fired them. Thankfully, we're not Emperor Ashoka where we chop the heads off. We don't want that. You know, Panatipata Veramani, we practice non-harm, non-killing. But we are doing something far worse if we see the problem and we don't do anything about it. Now, the problem also is the loyalty. In Asian culture, I come from an Armenian culture, so it's very close to the Asian culture. So we have a tremendous connection with loyalty of your culture, your ethnicity, ethnic background, heritage. So it's like, if you denounce that, if you reject that, it's like death. So we have to hold true to our ancestors, who we are, our belief systems. So we, by mistake, equate the two together. We say, it's okay, let me sacrifice some Dhamma to save the culture. That is the kiss of death to the Dhamma, as they say. That is the surest way to make sure that we are making the tumor get bigger and eat the whole person up. Because we are now taking part in the destruction of the Dhamma, because we didn't say anything. We didn't say anything. In legal terms, if someone is caught killing someone, and someone else was there, saw it, but they didn't touch, they didn't do anything, but they knew, and they don't come out, they don't come forward, they don't say anything to anyone, once the legal entities find out, that person becomes a culprit. Maybe he didn't pull the trigger, he didn't kill the person, but he had the opportunity to stop it. Or at least to let them know. In therapy, we have something similar. A person comes and says, oh, help me because my wife or my husband beats me. Because now, by the way, women also beat men, you know. It's 50-50. You'd be surprised. Men don't report it in the US. They don't report domestic violence because they're afraid, because of shame. Because everyone will laugh at you. You're 6'5", you mean to say this 5-foot-something who is beating you? I don't believe you. Go home. The man has an axe, has a knife on his neck, but it's like, they don't believe. So, coming back to the point, the person says, I'm being abused. Or my child never listens to me. I say, okay, what do you do in turn? They say, well, when they come and ask me, Daddy, Daddy, Mommy, Mommy, buy me this. I need this. Oh, please, Mommy, buy me this. I go ahead and buy them that. I said, what did you teach your child? You taught your child that it is okay to insult you. Just like the person who comes and says, my husband beats me. or my wife beats me. Why are you there? Or in the session, they would start defending them. And there's no reason for defending, because this has been happening again and again and again. And they're totally unhappy, and that's why they're showing up for therapy sessions. And this is called placating in English. Placating means you are allowing them, you are supporting them to be this way. In answer to your question. So if I see the tumor and I have the ability to cut it off, and I'm promoting it, I'm not saying anything about it. In fact, I'm opening my doors for more such entities to come. I don't see it to be any more 100% of the fault to be laying on that group of people anymore, who are not following the Buddha's instructions, because that is what they're being taught. Because in Asia, typically in Asia, what you have, it doesn't have to be Sri Lanka. You see the same thing in Cambodia, you see it in Vietnam, you see it in Thailand, you see it in Burma especially, and Sri Lanka, of course, where a family has 8, 10, 12 children in the villages. The smartest child is not going to be sent to the monastery. Oh no, it's the opposite. The smartest is going to be, the family is going to work hard to send him to a good school so that he could become, or she could become, a doctor or something, a lawyer. The dumbest is going to be sent to the monastery. I'm sad to say, this is again and again you see this. They're going to be sent to the monastery because it's free education, and he has a chance to make it big, and one day to become a Mahatera, to become an abbot, to have a monastery of his own. And guess what? They will. They will. This is set. This has been going on not just recently. This has been going on for centuries, and not just in Sri Lanka. This has happened starting from India. And that's why we lost the Dhamma in India. Completely. Completely. It was gone. So there is a system that we are allowing, we are nurturing by our silence. Because everybody's saying, you do something about it. Unfortunately, I'm the only bhikkhu I know who talks about this. I've never heard any bhikkhus mention. In fact, many bhikkhus said, don't talk about vassas. Why? I mean, in life, if someone is being indecent to you, harsh to you, disrespectful, do you tolerate it? If a friend, somebody that's a friend of yours, is disrespectful, insults you, do you keep them as your friend? So what's the difference here? My clothing style is different? I'm a bhikkhu, now you should be okay with that? No! The same standards have to be followed in answer to your question. You have the permission. That's why I wanted to start these series with these specific suttas, because I don't choose suttas randomly. They have to have a purpose, based on what we are seeing. So I'm hoping that these will allow you, give you the permission, not just you, Brother Leslie. You have the courage to come out and say it. And I love that you did have the courage to say it, because you verbalized many people's thoughts. I know people in America don't have the guts to say this. They don't. Unfortunately, they've been taking on a new religion called now Dhamma or Buddhism, replacing their old religion, but it's the same system. My parents used to say to run from the rain only to get caught in a hailstorm. That's an Armenian saying. To run away from something only to get caught in something even worse. So, you have so much power, it's amazing. But if you don't do it, you are actually placating. You're causing the problem to perpetuate. And for the virus, that is a pandemic, by the way. That is a real pandemic in my book. Because something bad will happen to the Dhamma because of this. And that's a real virus for me. And that's one of the reasons why I try to do my small part in whatever energy, however energy I have left in me, and risking it all. And that's why I am homeless. Literally, I don't have a home. But I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. Because Lord Buddha's Dhamma is alive. And they might turn me away from all temples. Dhamma in my heart is my home. The Dhamma is safe.
What role does the Buddhist community, such as it is, or the Theravada community, what role would it play in this kind of maintaining the standards of the monastic order? Yesterday, I happened to watch a feature done by Channel News Asia, that's based in Singapore. It's very good. It was about militant Buddhism. And basically, it started with Burma, Veatu, and the pact that he made with a similarly militant monk in Sri Lanka. I don't remember, I don't know his name, Brother Leslie. I think you would know. Very fiery and blah, 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 and all that. And the pact that they had made to advance your cause or whatever, okay. When Viratu first kind of appeared on the international stage with the abuse and ill treatment of the Rohingya Muslims and so on and so forth, for me personally, I was really shocked. And I asked my teacher monk at that time, who incidentally is Sri Lankan, asked, why was the Buddhist community silent about it? Why didn't they say something? I know in Buddhism it's different. We don't have like a global leader, like the Vatican, for the Catholic Church and so on. I mean, the closest we have is like Dalai Lama and this Tibetan, such as he is. Why are they silent? And on a smaller scale, we see a lot of other abuses or whatever, bad practices that go unnoticed or unreported, or nothing much is done about it, except I think in California there was some monks who were not doing what they shouldn't be doing, and in Thailand as well. But what role does the monastic community have in advancing your cause or standing on your platform? Thank you.
These are loaded questions, loaded in a good way, because they are multi-layered, like Brother Leslie's and yours, because they go straight into the heart of the matter. I don't like to beat around the bush. I don't like to be indirect. Sometimes you have to be, I understand. But given the nuances that your question presents and the problems it addresses, one has to be direct. I can share with you an experience I had 2 years ago when I took the Dhamma to the land of my ancestors, as some have called it, me doing, which was taking the Dhamma to Armenia. They had never seen Theravada monk. I think they had seen, actually, to correct myself, there was a Thai monk who had visited a year prior to do a weekend retreat, but that was in a very secluded one area. Here I was in the middle of the piazzas, the center squares in Armenia, traditionally very Christian, and they hold themselves they're very proud of the fact that they were the first Christian nation in the world. Okay. And here was a person walking on their streets, bald-headed, wearing robes, And initially they were talking to me first Russian and then English, presuming that I don't speak the language, but I did. And now that was causing them to do a double take. What? They were really shocked. 3 days after I arrived, the war began because the neighboring country of Azerbaijan attacked Armenia. And there were thousands and thousands of people dying on the villages. So at that time, I had stopped being a psychotherapist because I was no longer a layperson. But as a bhikkhu, you can help, especially if your preceptor Upajjhaya has allowed you, and if this situation arises. So there were many, many people who were in need of someone to talk to. So I made some business cards in Armenian, so I had them distributed, and for free psychotherapy sessions for anyone who would come, in Armenian. So after the initial shock of sitting in a room with a bald-headed man who they were afraid of, maybe I was going to convert them. I didn't talk about Dhamma, but all my messages in helping, in giving them compassion, giving them tools, were all drenched and coming from the Dhamma, without the label Dhamma. And they were walking away happy. But I was hurt because no news agencies were ever reporting any incident. Now I reached out to very well-known bhikkhu Mahatheras, whom I personally know. We've known each other basically on first name basis. If I mention the names, you would know, oh, such and such. Elderly bhikkhus, American. Okay? And I said, Bhante, so-and-so, I am doing this, and I am sharing the Dhamma in a country that has never had proper Dhamma at all. You have very new agey things, so they are basically 40 years behind the West in being exposed to the Dhamma. That's how far back they are, because it used to be a Soviet country. And I also provided a very short documentary to give the Mahathera some ideas, and from a neutral position, instead of thinking that I am being biased by any chance, even though I'm giving personal examples. The response was rather quick, and this Mahathera, who is very much involved in political movements and things like that in the West, globally and things like that, he said, oh, I can't get involved in the politics. Even though I had provided him with concrete evidence, personal, on-the-ground, grassroots evidence of this is what I'm encountering, and I just need you to put a word out there because the CNNs are not reporting, Associated Press is not, Reuters is not, Al Jazeera is not, Figaro is not, The Guardian is not, nobody's reporting this. And 7,000 young men, just the soldiers who were, actually drones were dropping bombs and houses. I had clients, I had actual people whose brothers and uncles were killed in front of their home. And he said, I cannot get involved in the politics. Meanwhile, that was the first portion of the email. 3/4 of the email was filled up with his hatred towards Donald Trump. Meanwhile, in the beginning, he's saying he cannot get politically involved. That was my look. That was my reaction. Because there's an opposite thing that I'm seeing here. This is like paradoxical. So I said, I'm not going to try that, because some years earlier, 2004, when the tsunami hit, and most of Asia was affected, I was in the front lines. We were collecting money to send to Sri Lanka, to Thailand, to all these things. The same thing happened when Nepal, when Kathmandu, when there was the earthquake. We were collecting money to send to Kathmandu. We didn't care if they were Buddhists or not. But here was this political position which was very one-sided, which was very mainstream media. Very political, even though I was being told that it was not. So, in that way, I will try to address your question now directly, which is, it is no different than the political scene. When you're looking at a person who is a bhikkhu, to expect him to be somehow a higher breed of a human being who thinks truly with compassion and understanding by looking at the other person, and then come from that position and address the matter just like you would expect from anyone else, that would be a high expectation on your part, unfortunately.
Unrealistic?
Current situation? Yes. Because what I have seen is they have turned into islands. I have been receiving emails from around the world during these last 2 years especially, of individuals who want to ordain. And some of the things that they share with me tells you that these people are really interested. But they are being demanded certain things. Temples were closed. The government's initial city, their own legal requirements notwithstanding. We have to respect the country's legal requirements. But what you had were monasteries and centers who were becoming more stringent, more critical, to open their doors for people who really needed help. They were saying, sorry, doors are closed, no one can help you, bhikkhus are not available. And some people are being turned away because of their health status. One monastery has made it official, it's also a Thai forest tradition, in America, very well known, I'm not going to mention, made up this rule that if the candidate is above the age of a certain age, basically, if you're in the 20s, maybe mid-30s, we can still accept you. But if you're above that, we cannot. Well, who gave them the right to make up such a rule? Because many of them have gone to Asia, have come to Asia and freely were taken inside, given the Dhamma, given the ordination. So now you have very much of the presence of dirty politics. So this is sad. That's why I keep on saying the laity must be informed of, one, the foundation of the teachings, that is, to be very well augmented, supported by that, and two, with the realization that you have so much power. Don't treat me, don't treat the bhikkhu any differently when it comes to you expecting results. I know you cannot tell if the bhikkhu is an arahant or not. Fine. But there's other indications, you know. Is the person decent? At the very least, the bhikkhu must have a loving heart. At the very least, they need to be generous, not hold. You have bhikkhus in Europe and America holding on, not just America, New Zealand, Australia, holding on to their vihara as if it belongs to them. How? We're not even allowed to have anything, let alone 184-acre land. So you have bhikkhus who are promoting ownership. And that is something I'm completely against. Because what life am I leading? Am I living a lay life? At least take off your robes. I respect that. This robe, go back to lay life and live like a lay life, because that's what I'm seeing you live like. I respect that. In that sense, I have more respect for lay people who are really practitioners. Today, I know lay students who are noble disciples. who have the Dhamma in their hearts. Lay disciples. So it irks me when I hear a bhikkhu say, a layperson cannot attain Nibbana, or a layperson cannot even attain the fourth jhana. Who said that? Where do you get your sources from? There's nothing like that in the suttas. In fact, the majority of the students that Lord Buddha had who were attaining the first, second, and third stage were lay people, because the lay people were more in number. And they were the ones who were producing more Arya Savakas. So this is not to talk down to the bhikkhus. I happen to be one. But we have to at least see a problem and call it out. Years ago when I was a high school teacher, when a parent came and argued with me, the first week actually I started working because the other teachers had left in mid-session. So they called me from another school. They said, could you please come? I said, I can only give 2 weeks notice. They said, sure, come. So 2 weeks later, I was now in a different school teaching the third quarter out of 4 quarters. So, and I had to turn in the grades. So I turned the grades in because I give them their exams. And I've seen these students in class. The day after I have handed those report cards, I go outside and I see a line of parents wanting to come and talk to me. Usually mothers. And they are angry. Why did you give my son a D? Why did you give my son a B? My son always gets an A. Why did you give it? I said, okay, hold on, one at a time. I said, what's your problem? Well, my son, so-and-so. And I said, ma'am, your son is not asking questions, he's having fun in the class, he's not disciplined, he's not listening to me, he's not respectful, and he doesn't know the answers. And he's not trying. Oh, you give my son a B, or you gave him a D, which is, in the 60s. I say, ma'am, I never give anyone grades. And she's like, what? You're the teacher, you're giving grades. And I said, no, I just record the grade. Your son gives himself the grade. And they're like, what? They were scratching their heads like, I said, ultimately, do you want your son 10 years later, because I see your son 10 years later in my mind, when I'm giving instruction, when I'm recording the grade, I am seeing your son 10 years from now in a university auditorium, in a very demanding class, and a professor is asking a very difficult question, and I am seeing your son's hand come up to answer the question amidst the 646 other students. Your son's hand is the only one that comes up because your son knows the answer. That's what I'm preparing your son for. That made that mother become quiet because she saw what I'm trying to say. And one particular mother that comes to mind, her son ended up actually becoming a professor of law in Massachusetts, state of Massachusetts. And I would always have these discussions, arguments from her side. But what I'm saying is the demand must be up, high. Because as they say in lay life, you pay what you get what you pay for, right? So if you are not demanding from your bhikkhu a certain standard, you're going to get substandard, I'm sorry to say. But don't come complaining to the Dhamma. I'm not going to make friends, of course, in the Sangha. Many people are not going to like it, but hey, I don't care. I don't care. For me, my teacher is Lord Buddha. And it's not outside. It's in our heart. Nibbana can only happen in your heart. The Dhamma is in your heart, or not. When people take refuge, is it truly Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Sangham saranam gacchāmi? Or is it really Lobang saranang gacchami, dosang saranang gacchami, mohang saranang gacchami, kileshang saranang gacchami. Is it the defilements that you're taking refuge in? Let's be honest. These are not just words. They have to have meaning. If somebody comes to you, if you were going to marry someone, and they came and they said, I love you, but they said it like, you know, they're lying. Would you listen? Would you believe them? Well, what makes you think that this is different? When we take refuge, we have to have everything on the line. That's what Lord Buddha is saying. Keen interest. It's like that desire, which Lord Buddha calls chanda, C-H-A-N-D-A, chanda. Because wherever your chanda is, that's where yoniso manasikara is. Your attention is going to be there. So if I, as a bhikkhu, am thinking about my reputation, my big van, my house, my, I don't know, whatever, my supporters, then you know where my chanda is. It's not in the Dhamma. But people can learn. I am also a believer in that. But we have to at least be honest and say it like it is, instead of avoiding the elephant in the room. So let's not avoid the elephant in the room. And as far as being faced with the realities of the politics and all that, and bhikkhus and communities not coming to the forefront and saying what needs to be said, that is the sad case, but at least don't lose your own compass. Fortunately, we don't have a leader that we have to follow blindly. Like you said, the Catholics do this and that. And I love that Lord Buddha did not put anyone like that, even though we have done that. The Vassas are example. Yes, people have considered, oh, I have the highest Vassa, so everyone will follow me. I'm the biggest head honcho in this room. No, you're not. Remember that 7-year-old Arahant novice? One time in the UK, I had to bring up the Venerable Sariputta again in a different incident. One day, Venerable Sariputta was busy doing something, and he would actually stay behind in the monastery to make sure, in the mornings, to make sure everything was okay. He looked after the sick, he cleaned the monastery, and then he would go to Pindapada. So one day he's doing one of those things, I'm presuming, and his robes are touching the ground, the floor. And a young novice monk, barely 7 years old, turns to him and says, "Your robe is touching the ground," in a very scolding manner. Child. He doesn't know who the general of the Dhamma is, Venerable Sariputta, the chief. Venerable Sariputta doesn't say, "Who are you? You're a nothing, you're a cockroach, what are you talking about?" He doesn't say. Immediately Venerable Sariputta starts fixing his robe, despite who it came from. He fixes his robe, makes sure that it's not touching the ground, because we're not allowed to have the robe touch the ground. And then immediately he puts his hands in Anjali, and he bows to the boy and he says, "Thank you, teacher." Smiles and walks away. Today, I don't know how many bhikkhus will even accept that. Just like that bhikkhu in the UK, he started arguing with me that never happened to Venerable Sariputta. Because we were talking about humility and being kind to one another. So that is also missing. Kindness. Because people have turned this into another form of a possession, as if, which is very ironic, because when I go through airports, the security always asks me, "What do you have in your pockets?" And I say, "I'm a bhikkhu, I don't have any pockets." And they look at me funny. I was like, "Well, what is this?" And it's security. I say, "You're free to examine." So it's a belt. Is it leather? No, it's just threads, and it's like fabric. So they look, they really get in there. You know, they have the x-ray, they still want to touch. I was like, okay, but there's no wallets. So we don't have any wallets. But we make other kinds of wallets. But that's why the laity is so crucial. You have more power than you think. And I believe in quality versus quantity. So I don't care if we have 1 million bhikkhus versus 100, but good bhikkhus. But unfortunately, as in the second law of thermodynamics, if you know your science, energy moves from a state of order, composition, orderliness, into disorderliness. That's the science's fancy way of saying anicca. It moves from a state of orderliness, like think of the mountaintop, the summit, and eventually it breaks down and turns into tiny little sand grains on the beach. Even the Dhamma, Lord Buddha said, is going to become corrupted. And it started even at his time. So we are very lucky that we still have it. But that doesn't mean that we should be okay, you know, sit like this and say, well, let the other generation figure it out. No. The other generation might not have even this. So, I hope my attempt at answering your question was somewhat satisfactory.